Hey, what's up? The film opens in the harsh fields of a sugar plantation. Solomon Northup, along with a group of enslaved men, listens to instructions before beginning the back-breaking task of harvesting cane. As they work under the burning sun, a man silently watches them from atop a cart, indifferent and distant. That night, during dinner, Solomon quietly saves a few berries, crushing them in an attempt to create ink. He wants to write a letter, a desperate plea for rescue, but the juice is too thin. Frustrated and defeated, he lays back down in the crowded slave quarters. A fellow slave climbs into his bunk and clutches him, silently weeping. Her pain echoes in the silence. She misses her husband. Solomon doesn't push her away. But as she cries, his thoughts drift back to a time when he, too, had love, a home, and a family. Years earlier, Solomon was a free man living in Saratoga, New York. He was a respected violinist, well-dressed and admired by those around him. He had a wife, Anne, and 2 children. Life was peaceful. One morning, Solomon says goodbye to his family. Anne is heading out to cook for a family out of town, taking the kids with her. Later that day, while walking through the park, a friend introduces him to 2 men, Mr. Brown and Mr. Hamilton. They claim to be part of a traveling circus and offer Solomon a generous payment to join them as a violinist for a short tour in Washington, D.C. The deal sounds easy, respectable, and he agrees. After performing with them, Solomon receives more money than promised. Brown and Hamilton insist he earned it. They celebrate with drinks, and Solomon downs his wine, unknowing their true intentions. When he wakes up the next morning, he's chained to the floor in a cell. Confused and terrified, he insists he's a free man, but the men who now hold him captive ignore his protests. They accuse him of being a runaway slave from Georgia. When he keeps insisting, they beat him savagely, leaving him bruised and bloodied, curled up in pain. Soon after, Solomon is transferred to a holding area with 2 others, a man named Clemens and a young boy. They talk briefly, and Solomon learns that Clemens had also been kidnapped and enslaved. A woman named Eliza and her children are brought into the pen. She instantly rushes to embrace her son. Eliza tries to stay strong, but she knows what lies ahead. Separation, loss, and suffering. The atmosphere is heavy with dread. Eventually, under the cover of night, Solomon and the others are chained together and loaded onto a ship. They're herded into the dark, filthy lower decks like cattle. There, Solomon meets Robert, a man who whispers a dangerous idea. They should rebel, take over the ship, and escape. But after considering the odds, they decide to wait, stay alert, and survive. That night, a sailor enters the hold and attempts to assault Eliza. Robert tries to intervene and is stabbed repeatedly. He dies in Solomon's arms. The next morning, Solomon and Clemens are ordered to throw Robert's body overboard. As they do, Clemens mutters, "He's better off now." Eventually, the ship docks, and as the slaves are led out, Clemens hears a familiar voice. His former master. With no hesitation, Clemens runs to him, abandoning Solomon without a backward glance. Left alone, Solomon watches helplessly as Clemens disappears, another reminder of how easily hope can vanish. Shortly after, a trader named Freeman arrives and begins calling out names. When he reaches Solomon, he calls him Platt. Solomon doesn't respond. Freeman slaps him hard and warns him, "Never deny your name again." Solomon, now Platt, is prepped for sale. As Freeman shows off the slaves to potential buyers, Ford, a well-dressed man, expresses interest in both Solomon and Eliza. Sensing this, Eliza pleads for him to also purchase her children. Freeman refuses. He quickly sells her son to another buyer and won't even entertain Ford's offer to take her daughter as well. Eliza breaks down screaming as her children are dragged away, but her cries fall on deaf ears. In the end, Ford only ends up purchasing Solomon and Eliza, but Eliza, devastated by the loss of her children, has a complete emotional breakdown during the sale, screaming and crying uncontrollably. Freeman, annoyed, demand she be restrained immediately. And to distract the buyers, he orders Solomon to play the violin. Solomon complies, forcing himself to stay composed amidst the chaos. Back at Ford's plantation, Solomon and Eliza are given food and rest before starting work the next day. Ford's wife, completely insensitive to Eliza's grief, coldly states that a good night's sleep should be enough for a mother to forget her children. No sympathy, no humanity. The following morning, Solomon and the other new arrivals are introduced to Ford's supervisor, Chapin, and a cruel overseer named John Tibbetts, a man who sings a mocking song warning slaves not to run, and he's enjoying every second of it. During a short break, Solomon and the others come across a group of Native Americans and share a brief moment of rest. Seeing one of them playing a string instrument triggers a memory in Solomon of his own violin and the life he lost. Later, Solomon presents Ford with a clever plan to move logs downriver using the current. Tibbetts mocks him, saying he's not an engineer, just a black man. But Ford gives the idea a shot, and it works perfectly, making Tibbetts eat his words. It's a rare moment of recognition. Ford publicly praises Solomon and even gifts him a brand new violin. But not everyone is impressed. Tibbetts is humiliated, and his resentment towards Solomon grows. One afternoon, Eliza breaks down crying outside the quarters. Fearing it will draw attention, Solomon yells at her to stop. Eliza snaps, accusing him of never mourning his own children. She calls him overly obedient, almost complicit. Solomon defends himself, saying he's just trying to survive. But when Eliza points out that Ford knows Solomon is a free man and still does nothing, her words strike deep. Eventually, Ford's wife has had enough of Eliza's weeping and orders her removed from the plantation. Meanwhile, Tibbetts starts sabotaging Solomon's work out of pure spite. Then one day, in a fit of rage, he tries to beat Solomon. But Solomon fights back, snatches the whip, and unleashes years of pent-up fury on Tibbetts. It's intense and deeply satisfying. Chapin arrives just in time and Tibbetts flees, vowing revenge. Chapin warns Solomon not to leave the plantation under any circumstances. It's the only way he can protect him. But Tibbetts returns, bringing 2 men with him, ready to lynch Solomon right there. Chapin intervenes with a gun, forcing the men to back down. For now. But Solomon is left hanging from a noose, barely touching the ground, struggling to breathe. And the most haunting part? The other slaves go on with their day as if nothing's happening. Only one woman quietly approaches to give him water. Solomon hangs there for nearly an entire day, until Ford returns, but the damage is done. Ford knows he can no longer protect him. Tibbetts will never stop. Ford says he has no choice but to sell Solomon to a man named Edwin Epps, infamous for his brutality, but the only one willing to take Solomon after what happened. Solomon tries again to explain that he's a free man, but Ford won't listen. He's too afraid of the consequences. And so, Solomon is handed over to Epps. On arrival, he hears Epps reciting scripture, twisting Bible verses to justify whipping slaves. A new chapter of hell begins. Every day, slaves are judged by the weight of the cotton they pick. Fall below the quota, you get whipped. Solomon doesn't escape the lash.
Among them is Patsy, a beautiful and kind woman who has become Epps' obsession. He praises her, touches her, and later drags her into the big house to force himself on her, while everyone else sleeps. Epps' wife, seething with jealousy, waits for Patsy's return and smashes a bottle over her head. She demands Epps get rid of her, but he plainly says he'd rather lose his wife than give up Patsy. The air on that plantation? Suffocating. One afternoon, Epps orders Solomon to fetch Patsy from a neighboring plantation, owned by a man named Shaw. Patsy is visiting Mistress Shaw, a former slave who rose in status by marrying the master. While they enjoy tea, Solomon is forced to wait. When they return, Epps is drunk. Solomon discreetly tells Patsy to keep her head down, but Epps sees the interaction and takes it the wrong way. Consumed by jealousy, he lashes out at Solomon. A chaotic chase follows, but it ends when Mistress Epps steps in and shames her husband, calling him a pagan. That night, the house descends into silence and darkness again. At the next forced gathering, Mistress Epps scratches Patsy's face and hurls venom at her, blaming her for her husband's sins. Devastated, Patsy begs Solomon to end her life. She even offers her precious jewelry in exchange. Solomon, broken by it all, refuses. Days later, a blight hits the cotton fields. Epps blames the slaves and rents them out to a man named Judge. While away, Solomon is noticed for his musical talent and is invited to perform at a party. He's even allowed to keep the money. Back on Epps's plantation, he receives a bitter glare from Patsy. Her pain, still raw, never leaves. Soon after, a white man named Armsby joins the workers. He's a paid laborer trying to rebuild his life. Solomon sees a potential ally and makes a risky move. He asks Armsby to deliver a letter to his friends in the north in exchange for all his violin earnings. Armsby agrees, or so he says. But it's a trap. Epps learns about the letter. Armsby betrayed him. Fortunately, Solomon hadn't handed over the letter yet. Thinking fast, he spins the story, making it seem like Armsby is trying to steal a job. Epps believes him. That night, Solomon burns the letter. His hope turns to ash. Time passes. Solomon is now assigned to help a Canadian carpenter named Baz build a gazebo. Baz is different. He speaks openly against slavery. Solomon takes note. One day, Epps panics when Patsy disappears. When she returns, she says she went to another plantation for soap, but Epps doesn't care. He's ready to whip her, and Mistress Epps urges him to do it. Too cowardly to do it himself, Epps orders Solomon to do it. The scene that follows is heartbreaking. Solomon cries, hesitates, but is forced to obey. When he falters, Epps grabs the whip and finishes the job himself. Patsy collapses, and so does Solomon, emotionally shattered. Later, Solomon confides in Baz. He reveals the truth about his past, his family, his kidnapping. Baz listens and agrees to help. He'll send a letter to Solomon's friends in Saratoga, even if it risks his own life. Time passes again. Solomon is working near the fields when a carriage arrives. The sheriff calls out using the name Platt. Solomon approaches, heart racing. Standing beside the sheriff is Mr. Parker, an old friend from New York. Solomon breaks down in tears as recognition sets in. Epps tries to interfere, but the sheriff shuts him down. Solomon is a free man, and he's going home. Before leaving, Patsy appears. They share one final hug. Raw, painful, unforgettable. Back in Saratoga, Solomon reunites with his family. He apologizes, though he has nothing to be sorry for. His daughter embraces him and introduces him to his grandson, named after him. Solomon is free, but he'll never be the same. He tried to sue those responsible, but the laws failed him. Even so, he refused to stay silent. Solomon Northup became a voice for the voiceless, an abolitionist, a survivor, and a man who turned pain into purpose. 12 Years a Slave holds a powerful 95% approval from critics on Rotten Tomatoes, with 90% from the audience and a solid 8.1 rating on IMDb. It's not an easy watch, and it's not meant to be. This is a raw, emotional, and unflinching portrayal of one man's stolen freedom and unimaginable endurance. Every shot is deliberate, filled with weight and silence that often says more than words could ever. And Chiwetel Ejiofor delivers a heartbreaking performance. His eyes alone carry the weight of 12 years of injustice, pain, and quiet strength. The film doesn't rely on dramatics. It confronts you with the truth. No sugarcoating, no escape. And that's exactly what makes it unforgettable. Oh, and a small but powerful detail, the real Solomon Northup's memoir, written in 1853, served as the foundation for the film, making this story not just powerful, but painfully real. My score, a well-deserved 10 out of 10. All right, your turn now. How would you rate this one from 0 to 10? If you're the quiet type, just drop a like and we're good, especially if you're still here. That means something. I hope you enjoyed it. See you in the next plot recap. And hey, I'm out. Bye.